Hi everybody, welcome to another video. So today we're having a quick look at the Iwata HP-M1 and HP-M2. It's just a little quick introduction. There's some spraying in this video, but what we're doing is we're doing some stencil work that I did probably a few months ago because it's rather cold in the UK at the moment. 4.4 degrees in the workshop, so it's a little bit chilly to be doing stuff like that because you just can't feel your fingers after a certain amount of time. But I wanted to just give you a, I wanted to say hello really because I haven't said hello for a while. And we reached 4,000 subscribers, so thanks to everybody that's subscribed and, you know, think about subscribing, etc. Much appreciated. So these are single action airbrushes. So what that means is you effectively have your air control on and off there, but your fluid control is there. There is a small little grub screw there, which means that you can calibrate this, and if you want fully closed as just being slightly open or whatever you want, you can do that. I've left it exactly as it is from the factory, so you close this and it's fully closed, no material comes out. But yeah, have a look, see what I was getting up to, and I'll run through a lot more about these. But certainly they're the ones that I reach. If I want to do just like a little blow in on a scratch or something like that, I tend to reach for these things because they're just so easy to clean, and they're just so easy to use and just easy really. So anyway, let's have a look, see what I was getting up to. What you'll notice at the start of the video is that these two actually look slightly different, and they've got different model numbers. So, you know, it stands to reason that they are slightly different. You've got the M2, which is a 0.4mm tip with a 7ml onboard cup, and you've got the M1, which is a 0.3mm tip and a 1.5ml onboard cup. Now, one of the things that's actually true throughout the Eclipse range and also the Revolution range, which is what this one is. One of the things with I always thought with a smaller cup, I'm relatively new to airbrushing. I've only been using airbrushes for probably about 4 years, something like that. And I always thought that you would want a bigger cup than you actually do. So a lot of people, I've noticed a lot of people tend to go for the 7ml cup, thinking that they will, you know, it will do all what they want. But a lot of the time it can be actually quite awkward. Not so much with this little tool, because these are very small compared to some of the more conventional airbrushes. But if you're having to look down the line of the airbrush, which sometimes you do have to, it depends what you're doing, but if you're having to look down the line of the airbrush, the 7ml cup is actually quite big compared to the size of the airbrush. It's actually quite big, so it gets in the way of the line of sight sometimes, which you don't get with the 1.5ml airbrush. And believe me, when you've got 1.5ml of paint, but you're only putting on really finely atomized little sprays, which these things obviously do, you don't actually use a lot of paint, very, very little. So the 1.5ml can last a long time. Bear in mind also that you're putting it for a smaller tip, so the output is less. But it gives you, the 1.3 gives you, it's basically for more finer work. You'll see me most of the time here using the 1.4, so the M2, and that's simply because what I'm doing isn't particularly intricate. You need a relatively fine film of paint, because you don't want it to actually protrude much height-wise when you clear the tank. But you're not actually putting on a great deal of paint. So one of the things I will say is don't overlook the smaller tip and the smaller cup. If you're thinking, well, I'll get the bigger one because it will do everything, because it's not always the case. Certainly I tend to use the bigger cup version with the bigger tip, but it's just because of what I do. If you're an artist or something like that, you will know that you will use the smaller tip probably more than the larger tip, just because everything is slightly finer. Yeah, I mean that's basically the big difference between the two, is the size of the tip and the size of the hopper or the paint cup. But what I was saying at the start holds so true. I use these for little blow-ins towards the end of the video, actually, once we've done this stenciling work, you'll see that I use it to just put a little bit of colour back on, where I've just gone too low with the sanding, and I've gone back through to the primer, and it just puts a little bit of base coat on there. And because it puts it on so light, you don't stand any chance, or very little chance. In fact, I've never had it do it. You don't stand any chance of getting a little fry up on the edge of the existing paint. So where you're putting the new paint over the primer, where it meets the existing paint, that edge will notoriously curl up. If you put the paint on too heavy, it can curl up again, because you get a reaction. So little airbrushes like this, I find, are really good for doing that, because you can just put enough on to make the colour uniformed over the whole of the area where you've gone too low, the rub through, and it doesn't cause a reaction. So I use them quite a lot for that. Also, if I'm removing scratches and things like that, you can put just a little delicate layer of paint, just a little faded out layer of paint, and you can put it on so small. So I use it for that. I'm not an artist. I wouldn't claim for 1 minute to be an artist. So if you're looking at this video thinking you're going to pick up some art tips, then forget it. You're definitely at the wrong place, because this guy, he might know how to paint a few things, but he's certainly not an artist. But you know, I use them for different tasks, and I think a lot of people, which is part of doing the video really, a lot of people use them for tasks other than art. A lot of us aren't as talented as some people are when it comes to doing various art projects, so we use it like this. We use it for filling in and things like that, where you want a really fine film of paint with no detriment to the paint underneath or anything like that. And of course, if you're putting on a nice fine film of paint, you stand, in the case of this and most other stencils and things like that you're doing, you stand less of a risk of any paint seeping underneath the side of the stencil. So just mentioning the stenciling material, actually, I cut these stencils out. I design and cut these stencils out myself now. I bought a Cameo 4 just over a year ago now, I think it was, and I've used that quite a bit, and I find it really good. But with stencil material, one of the hardest things to do, I find, is to transfer it. So I've literally just ordered some low tack transfer paper, which should help it, because the main difference between vinyl and this stencil vinyl is that the stencil vinyl has a much lower tack rate. It's enough to obviously stop the paint penetrating through, unless you drown it, of course, which is another reason for using the airbrush. But it's enough to, as I say, seal off that area so that the paint doesn't come through, but it makes it much easier to lift off. So I do use vinyl sometimes as a stencil, and you know that's going to give you a good solid line. You know the paint's not going to penetrate it, but when it comes to actually getting it off, it can be a bit more difficult. And of course, what you don't want is any residue left, because if you've got fresh paint, you're not going to be able to put a bit of thinners or whatever on it and take it off, because you'll damage your artwork basically. So it needs to be done right straight away. So yeah, I've found this is by a company called DE Tape, and that seems to work really well for me. The only problem, as I say, I've had is transferring it on the transfer paper. But I've ordered a lower tack transfer paper, because when you get into more detail, especially with writing, I've got a tank for somebody to do for the Isle of Man TT for next year's 2024's Isle of Man TT. They're going, and they want just a logo thing on their tank for the Isle of Man. So I'm going to do that in paint. So I'll use a stencil and an airbrush for doing that. But it's got sort of like small lettering, and it's a nightmare to transfer. So anyway, I'll hopefully I'll do a video of that when I get the stuff sorted out, and I'll show you it. But as I say, one of the things with these little airbrushes is I seem to want to use these all the time. And one of the things you'll notice with them is that they seem to be really easy to clean. Most airbrushes are quite easy to clean, but these just seem easier for some reason. I'm not sure why. And I quite like the ability to control the paint at the back, and I think that's because I'm obviously I normally use spray guns, so the ability to be able to use the control knob at the back, very similar to you do with a spray gun, actually suits me really well. So I think that would actually suit a lot of people that are thinking about maybe getting one of these airbrushes, because I think you'll probably find that it would suit you. It would suit you quite well. As I say, you can calibrate it, but I like fully wound in is off, and that's what I'm used to really. They're relatively cheap. I say relatively cheap, depends where you get them from, but I get them from I got it from Japan, from Painting Tools Japan, and they weren't particularly expensive. If I remember right, they're about £100, something like that, £100 odd. Bit cheaper than they are in the UK normally, anyway. Exactly the same gun. They're made in Japan. They're very good quality. The Revolution series, which is what this is sort of like the next step up from the is it Neo? I think they call it Neo. You get the green and black box, which is the Neo. You get the red and black, which is what this comes in. Although this is predominantly red, but it's the red and black series, which is the next series up. And you get actually a really good quality spray gun. Spray gun. I keep saying spray gun because I'm used to saying that. You get a really good quality airbrush for reasonable money. The first airbrush I got was a Harder and Steinbeck. Now I know they are called actually different things in different markets, but I can't remember what they're called. I know in Japan they're called something else, but Harder and Steinbeck in Europe, and I think in the US as well. And it was the CR Plus, which was their. It's got a removable cup, so you can have like a bigger cup or a smaller cup. You can get different tips for it, although you can actually get different tips for a lot of the Iwata spray guns anyway. And I thought, that would be a great airbrush because it's probably all I'll ever need, etc., etc. And I really didn't like it at all. I had problems with it leaking straight away. It's supposed to be okay for solvent paints. I use mainly solvent paints, which is what I'm using here with the Iwatas without any problem at all. I use mainly solvent paints. And I ended up replacing the O-ring with, I've got loads of boxes of different neoprene O-rings, so they're solvent resistant. And I just found one that was the right size and put that in rather than, I think they wanted about £12 or something for a new one. But I paid nearly £200 for that. And although it's a sort of like a do-it-all, the trigger kept sticking and I had to repair that. I think there's a mod for the trigger. I haven't actually looked to see what the mod is because I just don't use the gun anymore. Sorry, gun. I keep saying gun. I just don't use the airbrush anymore. So I was quite disappointed with that. And then when I got my first Iwata airbrush, which was the HP-BS, I think it was, which is the Eclipse version. I'm trying to remember the model numbers because they're all very similar. But it was the Eclipse version. And I paid about £135 for that, and it was like chalk and cheese. It's just so much better. It doesn't have on the CR Plus. You have like similar to the M1 and the M2. You have a way of controlling the fluid with like a stopper, so that it stops the amount you travel back, which again seems quite a good idea, but you don't actually use it. I found in reality I really didn't use it, and maybe I'm just not specialist enough to want to use that, but I just found that I didn't use it at all. So I got that Iwata, and ever since then the only airbrushes I've got is Iwata. I've got quite a few different ones. I've got the TR1 and the TR2, which is like a little trigger version of the HP BS, a little trigger version of that. and I got these ones, and these ones I got sort of later on really. And as I say, these are the ones that I use most of the time now, because I just find them so easy to use, and the results are really good. As I say, they're easy to use, but they're also really easy to clean. You just literally unwind the needle at the back, and I know that's what you normally do, but it's just less to take off. You know, you just literally unscrew that thing at the back, pull it out. You can put some fluid through to clean the tip, and just put the needle back in. When you're putting the needle back in, just make sure that the little trigger activator, the little air activator that you put your finger on, just make sure that's in the right position. Otherwise the needle won't go through, and you need to be so careful with these needles because they are so small. Yeah, one of the things you need to be careful of when you're doing these is not to pull too hard with these stencils, not to pull too hard, because you're not sure whether you've got too much paint. And if you're using an airbrush and you get a nice fine amount of paint, you obviously need, all you want it for is colour. So you're aiming to colour in the part that you want to be black or red or whatever. And that's all you need. You don't need a thick coating for durability or anything like that, because the clear coat's going to go on top. So the thinner you can get it, the better. And it also, if you can get it nice and thin, it doesn't actually show on top of the clear coat. You know, when you run your hand over it after you've put the clear coat on, it doesn't sit proud at all. So it actually feels really nice and looks really nice. But as I say, be very careful if you put too much on when you're at this stage here, when you're pulling it off, because you've got such a film of paint, such a thickness of paint, it will actually try and pull it off. The other thing you need to do is to make sure, I've said this on a few videos before, make sure that you're not putting too fine a sandpaper over your, in this case it's done with clear coat. So this has been cleared, it's been sanded, but I use about 500 or 600 over the clear coat. Now some people will want to go finer, and the finer you go, the more chance you've got of, when you take your stencil material off, the more chance you've got of that actually removing the paint or starting to tear into your paintwork that you've done. So definitely worth doing this with an airbrush if you can. You can get away with doing this with certain spray guns, but the amount of material that's put out by spray guns, I find that if you have a full-size spray gun and you really throttle it back with the paint, you still need quite a lot of air to atomize it. So there's a big rush of air coming across with very little paint, and it tends to get slightly splashy, and you don't get that with an airbrush because you're using these. I use these at about 20 psi. I want to recommend 20 to 30 psi. If you're new to airbrushes, that may seem quite high because people think that an airbrush is going to run on really low pressure, but it actually doesn't. It has a low consumption of air, but the consumption of air isn't the same as pressure at all. You can have a high pressure but with low air consumption, which is what these are. But as I say, ideal for doing little things like this. I'm just literally touching in here areas that I've just gone down too low. So you see with the yellow paint, and you can literally just put a really thin film on with them, and you don't get any reaction whatsoever. So you can do it with confidence, and it just helps tidy it up before you actually do the final coat of clear, or coats of clear. I actually went on to put do some more airbrushing on these before I clear coated them. You will see the final results of all this. I've made a few different videos because I'm using different equipment and things like that, but you will see the final result of all this later on in various videos. But as I say, for touch-ups like this, the things are absolutely ideal, you know, which is fine. I wanted to say, I did say at the start, but I will say it again. Thanks to everybody who subscribed. We've reached 4,000 subscribers, which is 4,000 more than I ever thought I would reach, to be fair. You know, between us, we're obviously doing something right, because I'm, you know, I can stand here and stand here. I'm actually sitting. I can sit here and rabbit, you know, for England, but it's only you guys interacting and, you know, liking the videos and subscribing, etc., that keeps everything going, really. So yeah, a big thank you to everybody. And if you're watching the videos for the first time, then think about giving us a subscription, maybe. And again, here at the on the tank, you can see I've just gone through a little bit too low when I sanded it. When I said about using 500 or 600 grit paper, you can still actually get a little bit too low if you you know, do it too long. But I wanted to get a nice flat surface so that I could get these decals on, and then we could clear coat it. Anyway guys, thanks for watching the video as always. Cheers, bye bye.